It's difficult to put yourself in the mind of a mainlander living overseas. What I'm about to do is I'm going to read to you a letter written by a mainland student studying overseas in the West. And I think it gives a lot of insight into what people are going through when they go into a different culture, a place that's not China. I'm a mainlander living in the West. In mainland China, I've lived for more than 20 years and experienced the whole education system, from school to university. I've lived in the West for more than 8 years. Today, I want to share some thoughts on the culture shock of overseas mainlanders and why other ethnic Chinese dislike them/us. Usually, when mainlanders go to study or live in the West, the culture shock is tremendous. Besides the culture and customs difference, there are other reasons. Firstly, mainland China is pretty homogeneous. People speak Mandarin, write Chinese, talk about the same news, etc., etc. You barely meet people with different skin colors or from foreign countries if you don't live in the top-tier cities. So, many of them haven't learned how to respect and get along with people from different cultural backgrounds. And they don't need to learn because most of them won't go abroad. Secondly, the media and internet are all controlled by the state. The overseas websites and media are mostly blocked. Even if they're not blocked, most mainlanders are not used to reading English. Thus, their opinions are shaped by the state and people around them who are also fed the same information. And we all know that the narrative of the Chinese government is quite different from the West. Thirdly, most mainlanders are a majority in mainland China. If you're a majority in a society, you'll have less trouble and struggle compared to minorities. You'll find more people sharing similar backgrounds with you. As Chinese government doesn't encourage diversity, the minority groups usually don't have a voice. So lots of mainlanders just don't know the minorities exist and think everyone lives a good life just like them. Which is a valid point. You know, I've traveled all around China during my documentaries and having lived there for so long, and never once did I ever pick up that the Han majority ever treat the minorities as any different. They expect the minorities to be just exactly the same. Maybe they've got some funny clothing and some kind of special food that they cook and eat, but otherwise they believe that the minorities are just exactly the same, down the same path, think exactly the same way, and have the same sort of lifestyle as they do. And so they never really put themselves in the shoes of the minorities, and it's kind of sad because China treats the minorities as kind of a fun little diversion, people that have to be assimilated basically and should be brought into the mainstream and be like everybody else. Fourth, there is no political freedom in mainland China. The students are only encouraged to follow the CCP and to be high-skilled workers. Most mainlanders think politics is taboo and don't discuss politics much. When they do, they don't know how to discuss politics in a civil way. They've only learned how to discuss politics in the CCP way, which is rude, loud, and illogical. Suddenly, they're in the West, alone with just a few friends. They're not a majority anymore. Their native tongue is useless. They're interacting with people of different skin colors and cultural backgrounds. They're facing an environment in which politics is everyday life. Some are scared and just stay in their small Chinese circles, which is something that anyone who's ever visited a campus which has a large amount of Chinese students will know. It's incredibly difficult for Chinese students to break out of their little Chinese ethnic cliques. And I mean, on a larger scale, we can just look at all the Chinatowns around the world. It's very, very difficult. And so you very rarely get Chinese students mingling with other people, trying sort of to accept different cultures and things like that. It's just the way it is. So they stay in their small Chinese circles, continue reading the censored information from WeChat and Weibo every day, which is 100% true. And my wife's the same. She gets all her news from WeChat rather than watching the local news. Anyway, some would try to embrace the new world, but they expect too much and tend to overact to some problems. For example, if you live long enough in a diverse society, you'll meet good white people, bad white people, good black people, bad black people. You won't want to leave the country if you once encounter a racist on the street. But for lots of mainlanders, the problems in the West are new to them. And the CCP always told them the West is dangerous and full of racism. So they may go to extreme and generalize if they meet a racist, and they'll take a U-turn and become fiercely pro-CCP. Some mainlanders will also try to make friends with other ethnic Chinese, such as people from Hong Kong, Taiwan, or Chinese Americans. Due to the terrible image of the CCP, many ethnic Chinese outside mainland China think all mainlanders are brainwashed mobs. They're wrong. They shouldn't be against all mainlanders, but we can't only blame other ethnic Chinese for disliking mainlanders. Most mainlanders, even the open-minded who are anti-CCP, haven't had the problem of identity. In China, they're just Chinese, and people around them are also Chinese. So they just identify themselves as Chinese without thought. And for them, Chinese doesn't only mean nationality, but also race. If you're ethnic Chinese, then you should identify yourself as Chinese, or else you're immoral and a traitor. However, for other ethnic Chinese, Chinese only means the nationality. It represents mainland China and the Chinese government. They don't hate their root, their family, or Chinese culture. They don't deny they're ethnically Chinese. They just don't want to be ruled by the CCP or tied with mainland China. Some mainlanders can't understand that. If you're anti-CCP, it's okay. But if you say, I'm not Chinese, you're hurting their feelings. That's their bottom line. Some mainlanders would show unusual warmth to other ethnic Chinese when they first meet because they think, hey, we're all Chinese. And if you dare refuse that warmth, you're an arsehole who forgot your roots, and they may call you Banana Man behind your back. Finally, somebody has articulated exactly what I've been trying to explain for a very long time, and this is this idea of the identity of being Chinese. If you have Chinese blood, if you look Chinese, you have to accept that you're Chinese, and if you don't, you're considered a traitor, or somebody who's, I don't know, a traitor to the motherland, someone who doesn't have any gratefulness towards the motherland or towards your roots, somebody who shuns who you are, which of course is very far from the actual truth. And this is what's led to a lot of these conflicts at these sort of pro-democracy Hong Kong protests and things like that, is the mainland students overseas and the mainland Chinese living overseas who've just gotten there. They see these other ethnic Chinese groups that are talking against the CCP, they see them as attacking China itself. And they actually see them as traitors because they're Chinese, yet they don't say they're Chinese, obviously because they don't want to be labeled as a mainland CCP supporting Chinese person. They want to stick to their identities of being Taiwanese or Hong Kongese. Of course, they will never deny that they're ethnically Chinese and that they have Chinese family and they follow the traditions and everything. But that's what's causing a lot of these big conflicts. And on the flip side of that, if you don't look Chinese and you don't have Chinese blood, you will never be considered Chinese in mainland China and never be a Chinese citizen. And of course, that's quite difficult for a lot of people to swallow, myself included, being married to a Chinese citizen for many years, having lived in China for so long, and being a part of the system and paying your taxes and, working and being a part of China, and you're just some foreigner. That's kind of the way it is. That's very important to understand if you want to understand the mentality behind what's going on, especially with the protests and the conflicts. If you're a Chinese American who identifies yourself as a true American and have met some mainlanders trying to correct your identity, you may avoid hanging out with mainlanders in the future. Absolutely. It's not easy to live in a whole new society. You don't have any connections and you need a community that could help you. Lots of overseas mainlanders are pro-CCP because only the Chinese embassy would like to help them when something happens. They say local people and other ethnic Chinese don't care about them. They can only count on the CCP. And, to be truthful, the CCP did help them a lot. I won't deny the good the CCP did, but I have another question. Why are there no other groups and communities who can help overseas Chinese? In my opinion, it's just because the CCP is too powerful and wants to control everything. It only allows pro-CCP organizations, even in foreign countries. If an organization is big enough, the CCP will try to control it. If it won't cooperate, the CCP will treat it as an enemy. Do you have the courage to accept the help from the CCP's enemy? What will happen to your family and friends in China then? Only the CCP can help us is not the truth. If the CCP is not such a control freak, lots of non-official groups which are neither anti-CCP nor pro-CCP may appear. You can get help from those groups. More in this case, other ethnic Chinese wouldn't dislike the CCP as much and may prefer to have a better relationship with mainlanders. This is so true. Institutes like the Confucius Institute, which have infiltrated universities around the world, they are 100% pro-CCP. They can never say anything negative about the CCP or about the Chinese government. And he's absolutely right by saying that if there's a big organization that has got some kind of sway in the Chinese communities, let's call it a Chinese newspaper or an organization, and it's, attracting a lot of attention from the Chinese diaspora or the Chinese students. If that organization is not 100% pro-CCP, they will label it as an enemy. And just like he said, everybody will then be afraid to associate with that organization. This is a very, very powerful tactic, and it's something that's absolutely happening. Let's continue with his letter. It's almost done. As a mainlander, I don't like to be discriminated just because they don't like CCP. However, sometimes I think I deserve it because I don't have the courage to stand out. If there are no other voices of mainlanders except the CCP's propaganda, how can people from outside know that we don't agree with the CCP? If we don't stand out, we should be prepared for a world that is just increasingly unfriendly to mainlanders. Now, I don't know the author of these letters. He calls himself 不是五毛, which means he's not a 50 cent. 50 Cent being a sort of paid propaganda army soldier, I suppose. But I'm very grateful that he put his thoughts out there for other people to read. It very clearly demonstrates what most mainlanders are going through who live overseas. It's either accept the party rule or you're an enemy, and then you have a lot to fear. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, guys. I certainly found it educational reading his letter, and it definitely ticks all the boxes of everything that I've witnessed myself living in China for so long. Can't wait to see you in the next one. And until then, you know the drill. Stay awesome. And another SerpentZA every Friday, same time, same place. Wednesday, you can check out Lao 86. Most importantly, on Monday, we've got ADVChina, and we've got our podcast too.